In this video, I want to explain how the X-Men can help us understand the opening psukim of this week's parasha. The Torah opens up, Ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the laws that you should set before them. Ki tikneh eved ivri, sheish shanim yavod, uvashvi'it yitzeh l'chavshi chinam. The Torah now gives explanation of all the mitzvot that relate to Hebrew servants, to avadim, slaves. Now, there's something very strange here. These are the very first mitzvot being taught after the amazing event of Har Sinai and the Ten Commandments. And the best thing that God could come up with to teach us about was how we should treat our slaves. Even stranger, Zalman Saratskin points out, we had just left Egypt. If there was anybody who didn't need to be taught about how to treat and not to mistreat slaves, it would be us. We'd just been slaves for hundreds of years. Now, there's actually a parallel mitzvah in this week's parasha about how we treat a ger, a stranger. The Torah says, "V'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu, ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim." We need to not mistreat the stranger, because we should remember that we were strangers in Mitzrayim. In fact, this mitzvah repeats itself about 36 times throughout the Torah. Over and over, Hashem tells us to remember how we were strangers in Mitzrayim, so that we should not mistreat other strangers, other people who have no one to support them. Now, what's the explanation? Rashi actually says, yes, you're supposed to remember how you were slaves in Mitzrayim, because you should just realize that if you mistreat them and talk to them about how they're strangers and they have no support and they're alone, they're going to say the same thing back to you. Ramban takes a different tack. He says we should realize that just like we were strangers in Mitzrayim and Hashem backed us up because we were being mistreated, trust me, if you mistreat the Gerim, Hashem is going to do the same thing to you. But the Rashban takes a different tack. The Rashban says we have to be careful not to mistreat the strangers, not to speak to them badly, because we should realize and remember that we were once strangers. How could you do to them what was done to you? And that's a great question. How could we do to them what was done to us? In the first scene of the 2000 film, X-Men, an amazing thing happens. It opens with a black and white video of Eric Lencher, a young Jewish boy, being separated from his mother and father in the Auschwitz concentration camp. And as he's being pulled away and his mother and father are being pulled in a different direction, taken to their deaths, the boy begins to scream and he sticks out his hands. And then all of a sudden you see the metal bars, the gates of the camp begin to bend. And it's clear that the boy is doing it. He's got power to move the metal. And one of the Nazi guards sees what's going on, bops him over the head, puts him out. Many years later, we return to young Eric Lencher, except by now, he's Magneto, the big villain of the movie. And what he's become is a big, powerful mutant who actually believes that because he has superpowers, all mutants are the master race of Earth. And it's their job to enslave, or in some cases, eradicate the human nation, the human race. Now, this is a classic question. How does a victim of the Holocaust grow up to be someone who wants to perpetuate another one? And this is where Saratskin explains. He points out that the truth is that we see this all the time in life. The abused becomes the abuser. Those who are on the bottom, who had to deal with being oppressed and hit and suffered, those are the exact kind of people who, when they have the upper hand, they tend to use it. They tend to become the kinds of people who abuse that power. That's the reason why Magneto becomes the kind of person who he remembers what was done to him and now he wants to do it to the rest of the world. And that's the reason why Hashem's first command to us after we left Mitzrayim and after the Aseret HaDibrot is, I know what might happen now. You will backslide into becoming the new oppressors. You will become the Egyptians to the slaves and strangers in your midst. Don't do that. Make sure that you don't become the new oppressors. Life offers us two main challenges. One is about how we act when we're down, and the other is about how we act when we're up. Of the two, how we act when we're down can often be much more physically demanding. But how we act when we're up, when we're at the top, is the much more difficult challenge. What do we do when we have the upper hand, when we have the money, when we have the intelligence, when we have the power? That's when our real personality gets tested.